Have you ever watched the people you love most walk calmly into your life and start removing you, piece by piece, while smiling over dinner? That night I learned betrayal can arrive on a clean white plate, with candles lit and laughter rehearsed. I thought I was hosting a family meal. In truth, I was walking into an ambush. I'm Jolene, and a week ago I was preparing the kind of dinner that makes a house feel like a home. The house was my first big achievement, a 2-story place with warm oak floors and a kitchen that smelled faintly of lemon oil. All day I had moved in a quiet rhythm, polishing silverware, wiping the countertops twice, setting out my grandmother's china with its faded blue rims. I wanted every detail to whisper welcome. As I laid out place cards, Dad at the head, Mom to his right, my sister Isolde across from me, it felt almost like a diplomatic summit. Maybe, I thought, tonight would finally be different. Maybe Dad would look at me without calculation and say, "You've done well, Jolene." Maybe Mom would stop rearranging salt shakers as if my life were slightly out of order. By 6:35 p.m., the first car crunched over the gravel drive. My stomach tightened. I smoothed the skirt I wasn't used to wearing and adjusted the wine bottle for the third time. The knock came, polite but heavy. I opened the door with the kind of smile you practice in a mirror, not fake, just fragile with hope. "Smells like food," Isolde said, stepping in without a hello. She was in suede boots that left faint dust on the freshly mopped floor. Dad followed, eyes glancing along the ceiling and corners like he was inspecting a rental. "This place has good bones," he said. "Feels like it should belong to everyone, doesn't it?" I forced a small laugh. "It's cozy, I think." Mom entered last, silent, her fingers grazing the mantel where I'd placed a childhood photo of the three of us. Saturday. The salad remained untouched. Conversation wavered between weather and small talk. No one mentioned my promotion at work or the effort behind tonight's meal. Through the main course, I noticed Mom watching the clock. "Everything's cooked," she finally said, a flat remark rather than a compliment. "Thanks," I replied, feeling heat behind my smile. Dessert came and went. I set the apple cobbler on the table, hand-cut fruit, homemade crust. I waited for approval that never came. Then Dad stood. It wasn't just that he stood, it was the way he folded his napkin with precision and set it down like a verdict. His jaw tightened. I recognized the look from every time I had stepped outside his unspoken rules. "We've discussed it," he said evenly. "This house should come back to the family." I blinked. "I'm sorry." "What?" Mom nodded without meeting my eyes. "You've done well, honey, but it's too much house. We think it's time you refocus." Isolde leaned back, arms crossed. "It's not personal." I heard a door open in the hallway and realized she had disappeared briefly. She re-entered carrying a green suitcase, my college suitcase. "We packed your essentials," she said calmly. "Just so this can be smooth." My breath caught. "I'm the legal owner," I whispered. Dad's smile was thin. "We'll sort that." No one else spoke. The house I had built as a symbol of independence suddenly felt like a stage set for their plan. I didn't cry. Instead, I gathered my phone and wallet and laid the house keys beside my untouched wine glass. The gesture felt ceremonial, like leaving behind a key to a story I refused to play in. Then I walked out into the cold night. The driveway lights blurred as I drove without a destination. The suitcase thumped in the back seat like a heartbeat. I stopped at a half-empty gas station on the edge of town, the overhead light buzzing like an anxious insect. My fingers trembled as I reached for my phone. It buzzed first, an unknown number. "This is Jolene," I answered. "Miss Shipman? This is Alexis from Midwestern Bank's mortgage department. I'm calling to confirm some recent changes requested on your account." Her voice was too chipper for midnight. My chest tightened. "What changes?" There was a request to add co-owners and update contact details, but it didn't come through our secure portal. We flagged it. "I didn't authorize any changes," I said firmly. "That's what we thought. You remain the sole legal owner. We've locked the account and logged the attempted change." A strange calm settled over me. "Do you have the names they used?" "Vernon and Mara Shipman," she said. It wasn't surprise I felt, it was recognition. "Thank you," I whispered, and ended the call. Inside the quiet car, I stared at the dark highway. They hadn't just ambushed me over dinner. They had tried to rewrite the legal facts of my life. The night air seeped through the cracked window, carrying a bitter clarity. I wasn't just locked out of a house. I was stepping into the first act of a war they thought I wouldn't fight. The gas station parking lot stayed with me long after I left it, a lone square of buzzing light, where I first realized this wasn't just family drama, it was theft. The drive back toward my neighborhood felt like moving through a dream you can't wake from. Houses passed in neat rows, their curtains glowing gold, their lives seemingly intact. Mine had been rewritten. I slowed as I reached my street. A car idled near the curb, unfamiliar. My breath tightened. I parked a few houses down and walked up the sidewalk, suitcase still in the trunk. The key I'd polished that morning no longer fit the lock. I tried again. Nothing. A quiet click from inside made me glance up. The door opened. A young woman I had never seen stepped into the frame, wearing joggers and a hoodie 2 sizes too big. "You, Jolene?" she asked, tilting her head. "Yes," I managed. "This is my house." Her eyes stayed flat. "I was told you wouldn't be coming back." "Told by who?" "Mara and Vernon. They said you left voluntarily. Something about instability." She gave a little shrug as if reading from a script. The words hit harder than the cold air. Instability, a family code for don't believe her. I could have argued, but I saw no point. I refused to perform the meltdown they had prepared her for. "I'm going to need you to leave now," she added. I stepped back, heels clicking on the concrete like a metronome of disbelief. My neighbor, Mrs. Kavanaugh, passed by with her terrier. "Morning, Jolene," she said, cheerful, as though I hadn't just been shut out of my own life. I managed a stiff nod. I drove away without a plan. Each red light felt like a test of willpower not to scream. At a deserted park, I finally pulled over and sat in silence. Memories flooded in moments I once dismissed as paranoia. My father's offhand remark when I was 22, "Once she signs, it's ours to manage." I'd told myself he meant taxes, maybe a car title. I hadn't wanted to know more. By the time dawn paled the horizon, I was parked outside Nora's building. Nora has been my quiet constant since college, steady, unsentimental, immune to Shipman family theatrics. I didn't text. I just sat there until she appeared at the lobby door, hair still damp from a shower, coffee thermos in hand. She took one look at me and unlocked the passenger side. Inside her small but sun-bright apartment, I finally exhaled. Nora set a chipped blue mug of coffee in front of me and waited. No questions, no pressure. "They changed the locks," I said at last, my voice barely a whisper. "There's a stranger living in my house." Her eyes sharpened. "What do you mean, stranger?" "They told the bank I added them as co-owners. The bank called, said I'm still the only name on the mortgage." Nora leaned back, jaw tight. "They didn't just kick you out. They planned this." I nodded slowly. "I think they started years ago." I told her about the overheard conversation in my parents' den, the casual she'll sign that had slid past me like background noise. My stomach clenched, remembering how easily I'd ignored it. Nora reached across the table, covering my cold hand with hers. "You need a lawyer, tonight." Her words steadied me more than comfort could. I wasn't just hurt. I was being robbed methodically, legally, almost beautifully. Later, as I lay in her guest room staring at the ceiling fan's slow rotation, other memories returned like shards of old glass. My mother casually asking for my social security number for insurance paperwork. Dad insisting I store important originals at their house for safekeeping. Isolde joking that my independence was just training wheels until marriage. Each recollection clicked into place like pieces of a hidden design. I had walked straight into an architecture of betrayal. Around midnight, a car door slammed on the street below. I jolted upright, heart pounding. Only a neighbor, probably. But the sound echoed with a new meaning. Everything ordinary could now hide an ambush. I closed the curtains and returned to bed, where the silence felt both protective and charged. I wasn't broken. I was bracing. Morning seeped into Nora's apartment as a thin blue-gray light, the kind that makes everything look a little too honest. I hadn't really slept. The hum of the fridge and an occasional car on the street sounded like warnings instead of comforts. When Nora came in with 2 mugs of coffee, I was already sitting at her small kitchen table with my laptop open but untouched. You ready to call a lawyer? She asked. No small talk. I nodded. Someone who deals with family property theft, if that's even a category. Nora's lips pressed into a line. Island. I know someone, Barbara Herrera. She helped a friend of mine in a messy inheritance fight. Dry, brilliant, and impossible to scare. 2 hours later, we stood inside Barbara's compact downtown office. Dark wood shelves, floor-to-ceiling windows with frosted glass for privacy. A desk so orderly it felt like an invitation to get serious. Barbara greeted us with a dry, firm handshake and eyes that seemed to measure the temperature of a room in seconds. Nora gave a concise summary, but Barbara soon turned to me. Tell me everything, she said, her voice clipped but not unkind. I began with the dinner, the quiet preparation, the folded napkin, the sudden decree that my house belonged to the family. I recounted the bank's midnight call and the stranger at my door. Words spilled in clean, deliberate lines. For the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't trying to sound calm. I was calm, the way you get when shock hardens into resolve. Barbara tapped a pen against a legal pad, jotting dates in brisk strokes. People assume real estate theft happens between strangers, she said finally. It's more common inside families. What you describe is organized coercion and attempted title fraud. She slid a checklist across the desk. Document everything. Don't engage emotionally. Forward all communication. Secure digital records. The clarity of each bullet felt like a lifeline. For days I'd been reacting. Now I had a map. Back at Nora's, we built what Barbara called a quiet fortress. First step, gather every scrap of proof. I logged into my cloud storage, heart hammering, and pulled up folders I hadn't opened since closing on the house. There it was. The deed stamped and signed, the release of lien, every mortgage receipt, clean as morning light. Nora leaned over my shoulder. Let's back everything up. External drive, encrypted folder, email to Barbara. As files uploaded, a thought flickered. I had installed a home security camera system months ago, mostly to catch porch pirates. Motion triggered, automatically backed up. I opened the dashboard. Clips rolled across the screen in time-stamped thumbnails. Click. There was Mara, my mother, calmly opening drawers in my office. Not rifling, just assessing, like a realtor measuring storage. Click. Isolda held one of my photo frames, slipped my picture out, and slid in one of her and Dad. Click. Vernon, my father, sat at my desk, typing on my keyboard as though testing how the room fit his presence. My breath left in a quiet rush. I didn't leave, I said aloud. They were already moving in. Nora's eyes hardened. Save every second. We organized the clips into a folder I titled, They Took It. I added scanned receipts, mortgage statements, even the bank's call log. Each file felt like a small victory, proof that my life still had borders. When I thought we were done, Nora nudged me. Check the house voicemail. You never know. I opened the account. A saved message blinked from 2 weeks before the dinner. I clicked play. Isolda's voice slid through the speaker flat, bored. Once she's out, don't let her back in, not even for the photo albums. The words landed like ice water. No anger, no regret, just logistics. I hit save and backed it up 3 times. Barbara called that evening for an update. I told her about the footage and voicemail. Her voice sharpened, approving. This is strong evidence of premeditation. Don't confront them directly. Let me build the legal wall first. After we hung up, I sat for a long time in Nora's dim living room, laptop balanced on my knees. Every clip I'd saved told a story they could no longer rewrite. The betrayal hurt, but underneath the hurt, a new certainty was forming, cold, clear, and immovable. This wasn't just about a house anymore. It was about reclaiming the narrative they thought they owned. The next morning, the city outside Nora's window carried on as if nothing in my life had ruptured. Delivery trucks hissed along wet pavement. A bike bell chimed faintly. I brewed coffee, the smell rich and steady, and told myself that ordinary sounds could still belong to me. Barbara called at 9 sharp. I've reviewed everything, title deed, camera footage, voicemail, she said. We have a strong case. The key now is to keep control of the timeline. Don't let them provoke you. Her certainty steadied me like an iron beam. After we hung up, I opened my laptop and began recording a video statement. The camera light blinked red, My name is Jolene Shipman, I said, shoulders squared. This is a record of what was taken from me by people I share blood with. This is not for sympathy. This is for documentation. I saved it in 3 different places: hard drive, cloud, encrypted email. Barbara's next step was a cease and desist letter. By mid-afternoon, she emailed an 8-page draft full of sharp legal language that read like poetry to me. Sitting cross-legged on Nora's rug, I read every line aloud. You are hereby notified that continued occupation, manipulation, or claim to ownership of the property located at. Each sentence felt like reclaiming oxygen. I printed it, folded it carefully, and sealed the envelope with my own hands. Dusk was falling when my phone buzzed. Vernon Shipman lit the screen. I let it go to voicemail, but the notification burned like a fuse. Finally, I pressed play. You just started something you won't be able to finish, my father's voice said, low, deliberate, almost calm. For the first time in days, I smiled. It wasn't amusement, it was recognition. He knew I was no longer the daughter who stayed quiet. I forwarded the message to Barbara. Her reply came within minutes. Expected. Keep it. We pressure harder. The house fight shifted quickly from emotional to strategic. I phoned Midwestern Bank for confirmation that my title remained locked. The rep's tone was different now, procedural and careful. I'm sorry, Miss Shipman. Because of legal proceedings, we can only speak with your attorney. They were closing ranks, an invisible tug of war, I could feel even through the phone. Nora studied me from across the kitchen. They're trying to contain the story, to keep it in the family. I nodded. But it's not in the family anymore. That night I hardly slept, but the sleeplessness no longer felt like panic. It was focus. I combed through every email, every receipt, every memory that might become evidence. I created a timeline of every conversation, every suspicious request for personal documents over the years. Each entry was like fitting another steel beam into a bridge I could finally walk across. By morning, I felt different, still bruised, but sharpened. I wasn't waiting for their next move. I was building the next chapter myself. Before sunrise, my phone vibrated with a message from Nora. Check your credit report now. Still in pajamas, I logged in on her laptop. It took 2 password resets before the page finally loaded, and then my stomach went cold. 2 new credit inquiries I hadn't made. One from a department store I hadn't stepped into in a decade. Another from a credit card company I'd never applied to. Both traced back to an IP address belonging to my parents' home. They're not done with the house, I said, voice steady but hard. They're going after my entire life. Nora read over my shoulder, jaw tightening. This is financial fraud. We need to add it to the case immediately. I dug through old emails for anything they could have used. There it was. A request from Mom 2 years earlier asking for my social security number, for tax prep. Another from Dad for a copy of my W-2, to double-check a deduction. I'd sent them without a second thought, still believing that trust was a kind of love. By late morning we were in Barbara Herrera's office again. She listened as we laid out every new fact, her pen scratching quickly across a yellow legal pad. They've crossed into identity theft, she said flatly. We file for an emergency restraining order today, property and financial. While Barbara began the paperwork, I sorted evidence into neat folders. Credit reports, old emails, bank call logs. The ritual steadied me. Each click was an act of ownership. That afternoon, an email with the subject line, "Evidence play in private," landed in my inbox. No sender name, just the file. My pulse jumped. Nora slid her chair closer. Open it. I clicked. At first, only the low hum of a moving car. Then my father's voice emerged, calm and deliberate. We start with the key, he said, as if planning a grocery run. Once she's out, change the locks and slowly shift everything. She'll push back, but if it looks like a family matter, it won't hold in court. Isolde's light laugh followed. She'll cry first, then call a lawyer. By then, Dad replied, the narrative's ours. The recording lasted barely a minute, but it felt like a lifetime of betrayal compressed into sound. I saved it to 3 drives and forwarded it to Barbara immediately. Her response was almost instant. This is the smoking gun. We can move for a court order within hours. By early evening we were sitting in a courthouse conference room, the fluorescent lights cold but strangely invigorating. Barbara handed a clerk a thumb drive and signed an emergency motion for a temporary restraining order and fraud investigation. The judge reviewed it on the spot and set a hearing for the following week. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt hollow but sharper, like glass that has cracked clean through but refuses to shatter. That night back at Nora's, I posted a redacted account of my ordeal on a private online support forum I'd been silently reading for months. No names, no sentiment, just the facts. Within hours, replies flooded in. This happened to my sister. My parents did the same, only I didn't catch it in time. You are not alone. I read each message slowly, breathing in the proof that my story wasn't an isolated disaster but part of a hidden pattern. The quiet recognition steadied me more than celebration ever could. The courthouse looked different when we returned for the official hearing. Same limestone columns, same security checkpoint, but I walked through the glass doors with a steadiness I'd never felt before. My heart still raced, but it was no longer fear, it was focus. Barbara met us on the steps, 2 manila folders tucked under her arm. Nora stood close behind me, a quiet pillar of presence. We passed through security and waited outside the courtroom. The polished wooden benches smelled faintly of lemon polish and cold air. I pressed my palms together and whispered to myself, "No trembling today." Inside, the room was cool and bright. Vernon sat at the defense table, his charcoal suit just slightly ill-fitting, as if he'd dressed for a performance rather than a fight. Mara avoided my gaze, her eyes darting between the judge and the floor. Isolde sat apart, legs crossed, jaw tight. The bailiff called the case. Barbara rose without theatrics and laid out the evidence with clean precision. Title deed and lien release showing my sole ownership. Bank records documenting the attempted co-owner change. Security footage of my parents and sister methodically moving in. The damning audio of them plotting to seize the house. The judge turned to Vernon. "Mr. Shipman, do you deny these actions?" He stood as though stepping into a boardroom. "We supported our daughter for years," he said smoothly. "This is a misunderstanding. We were trying to protect family assets." Barbara's voice cut in, crisp but polite. "Do you deny submitting false ownership claims to Midwestern Bank?" A beat. "I deny any criminal intent," he said finally. If she had just listened, none of this would have happened. The judge's eyes narrowed. Isolde's turn came next. She adjusted her scarf like it was armor. "I was only helping my parents organize the property," she said. "The house was always meant for the family. Jolene doesn't even like entertaining. She hardly used her office." Barbara raised a photograph Isolde, removing folders labeled with my name and placing them in a box marked with her initials. "You believed this space was yours?" "It felt like shared responsibility," Isolde murmured. "You are not on the deed, are you?" Silence. Finally, the judge turned to me. I walked to the witness stand, every step deliberate. I took the oath and spoke, not as the daughter who had been blindsided, but as the woman who had built the life they tried to erase. "I bought that house alone," I began. "I paid every mortgage payment myself. My father and sister entered without permission. My mother packed my belongings while I was at work. When I questioned them, they called me unstable." I paused, letting the stillness press the truth into the room. They didn't just try to take a house. They tried to erase the woman who built it. No dramatics, no tears, just fact. The judge took a long breath. "This court finds sufficient evidence that Miss Shipman is the sole legal owner of the property. The court upholds the temporary restraining order and will open inquiry into potential financial misconduct." The gavel struck once, sharp and final. I didn't look at my family as I left. Outside, sunlight spilled across the courthouse steps like a quiet benediction. A reporter hurried over, microphone in hand. "Miss Shipman, do you consider this justice?" I met the camera's eye. "Justice," I said, "is knowing I never have to explain myself to them again." The words surprised even me, but they felt truer than anything else I could have said. The following morning, I unlocked my front door with a new key, one cut after the court order, and stepped inside. For a moment, I simply stood on the threshold, listening. The house greeted me with an uneasy quiet, as if it too was waiting to see if I belonged. The air smelled different. My favorite eucalyptus scent had been replaced by the artificial lavender plugs Mara liked. Curtains I had never chosen hung stiffly at the windows. Even the floor seemed muted, like it had adapted to different footsteps. I set my bag down and began the slow work of reclaiming every room. One drawer at a time, I removed anything that wasn't mine. Generic magazines, a vase I'd never bought, a set of monogrammed towels with someone else's initials. Each item went into boxes labeled theirs. It wasn't spite, it was clarity. Behind the silverware tray, I found a cream-colored envelope with my name in Mara's handwriting. Inside, a single sheet of paper read, "You'll understand someday. Family decisions are complex." We meant well. No apology, no remorse. I carried the note outside, set it in the metal fire pit, and lit a match. The flame curled through her words until they were nothing but ash. "I understand perfectly," I whispered, and closed the lid. By late afternoon, I'd gathered every strange object they'd left. In the alley behind the garage, I spotted a bookshelf of mine propped beside two garbage bags. One bag had come untied, revealing my grandmother's lavender and rose sachets, heirlooms she had tucked between towels when I was a child. The scent rose sharp and heartbreaking. I snapped a photo for Barbara and carefully rescued the sachets. That evening, a plain manila envelope lay on the porch. Inside was a photo of my childhood bedroom, a red X drawn across the bed. The sight didn't frighten me, it exhausted me. I placed it in another evidence folder and, the next morning, walked it to the local police station. The officer logged the report but admitted there was no clear threat. "It could be symbolic," he said gently. "I know," I replied. "That's why it's worse." Days passed as I worked room by room. I rehung the cream curtains I loved, polished the scratched hardwood floors, and restored the photos that told my true story. Friends, mentors, moments of quiet joy. With every nail tapped and frame straightened, the house slowly began to feel like itself again. Then, late one evening, headlights swept across the driveway. Isolde stepped out, a shadow in a long coat. She carried nothing but her purse. "I was nearby," she said when I opened the door. "Thought maybe we could talk." I let her in but kept the conversation in the entryway. Her eyes flicked over the new pictures, Nora at the courthouse, Mrs. Kavanaugh, sharing cookies, images of a life she had no power to rewrite. "It's quiet in here," she said at last. "Most peace is," I answered. She hesitated. "I'm not proud of how things happened. Maybe I was jealous. Maybe I didn't think you deserved the house. But I didn't want it to go this far." "But it did," I said, "and you let it." Her mouth opened, closed. "I just didn't think you'd fight. You don't get to rewrite your role because I survived it." Isolde looked away, then turned toward the door. "Goodbye, Jolene." "Goodbye," I said, and closed the door behind her. 2 days later, a cream-colored Christmas card slid through my mailbox. The handwriting Mara's was unmistakable. "Wishing you clarity and peace," it read, with a printed quote. "Forgiveness is the scent the violet sheds on the heel that crushed it." There was no "I'm sorry," only philosophy, dressed as virtue. I tucked it, unopened, into a file labeled evidence. That week I invited Mrs. Kavanaugh over for tea. We sat at my kitchen table now, wholly mine, and she told me how she and other neighbors had long suspected something was wrong. "They acted entitled, like the property had already been theirs," she said gently. "But I'm glad you stood up." As I walked her out, the early winter air felt lighter. The house wasn't just a structure anymore. It was a witness that I had reclaimed. New Year's Eve arrived soft and gray, the kind of winter day when sound seems to travel farther. I wrapped myself in the thick blanket Nora had knitted the year she quit her law firm and sat on the front porch with a mug of black coffee. Fireworks cracked faintly beyond the trees. The house behind me, my house, was finally quiet in a way that meant peace, not danger. Earlier that afternoon, I'd walked through every room, not to inspect, but simply to be present. The office where I'd once worked late into the night now felt like a creative studio again. Papers neatly stacked, camera ready for new projects. The kitchen smelled of cinnamon from the first batch of cookies I'd baked since regaining the deed. Even the floor, once scratched and rearranged by strangers, held a warm sheen from hours of gentle polishing. I thought of all the small acts of defiance that had brought me here. Saving camera footage, cataloging emails, standing in court without a tremor in my voice. They weren't dramatic like a movie climax. They were steady, deliberate proof that survival can be quiet and still win. On Christmas morning a week earlier, I joined Nora's family for brunch. Her apartment pulsed with laughter and music, a toddler dragging a stuffed bear across the floor. As I stood in her kitchen sipping spiced cider, I realized these were the people who had shown up when it mattered. Not the ones bound by blood, but by choice and care. Chosen family. Later, back home, I pinned a card to my new corkboard. A note from an old college professor that read, "Freedom is not the absence of memories. It's knowing they don't own you anymore." Around it, I arranged small affirmations from women in the support group who had written things like, "You are allowed to close doors, and some survival looks like silence." Every phrase felt like a quiet chorus, a counterweight to years of manipulation. As evening fell, I opened my mailbox one last time. Inside was a brief letter from Vernon. His handwriting was tight and controlled. I shouldn't have let things go that far. I was trying to protect what I built. I didn't realize how much of it was yours. No, I'm sorry. No acceptance of the damage done, just enough words to sound like regret. I read it once and filed it in the back of a drawer. Not all doors have to be slammed, I thought, but some don't need to be opened again. When midnight approached, I stepped outside again. The air was sharp and clean. "They tried to take my house," I whispered, "but they couldn't take the woman who built it." A firework bloomed silently in the distance, scattering blue and gold over the sleeping neighborhood. I watched until the sky went still. Inside, I turned the deadbolt and rested my hand on the warm wood of the door. Not in fear, never again, but in affirmation. This home does not need to be explained, it only needs to be mine. And now at Island. If there is one truth I carry from this journey, it is that boundaries do not make us selfish. They make us free. Family isn't forever unless respect is mutual. Sometimes the loudest act of love for yourself is a calm, unwavering no. To anyone who has been erased, dismissed, or made to doubt their own ground, you do not have to shout to be heard. You only have to stand your ground, one deliberate step at a time. That is the loudest truth there, Island.